Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Here we are with some more heavy metal with community steel. But anyway, let's kick off today's episode. We open up today's episode with the SLK-43 from Coulson, and that was his 73 World War I behemoth that's got more firepower than I care to imagine here. That thing is practically a land battleship. But this tank right here, this one is from Wilhelm Bergdorf, and this is his VK3001H. This is the Henschel version of the Panther prototype, which is, well, it looks nothing like the Panther, but that's because the Henschel prototype didn't look much like the Panther that we'd come to know. This, for the early war period, it weighs in at 31.82 tons, so pretty much 32 tons. It's got a 75 millimeter main gun with 113 millimeters of penetration. What can I say about the vehicle? The gun actually is fairly accurate, does very good, does the trick. The gun depression's rather good. The armor, well, the armor lacks in certain areas, but it held up pretty much for the most part when I did my testing. And the mobility is really nothing to write home to mom about. And in general terms, that's what this vehicle is. It's nothing to write home to mom about. And all in all, I could definitely see why Germany went with the MAN version of the Panther over the Henschel version of the Panther. But either ways, the vehicle does do okay for its time period. If you put this in, say, mid-war, this thing would be absolutely dominated. Just doesn't have enough penetration, doesn't really have the mobility. However, it does look pretty good, and it looks fairly accurate to what photographs I've seen of this Henschel tank. Let's move on to the next one. And for the next one, we have the Chevalier Mark II from Coast 05. This weighs in at 59.42 tons. Has an 84 millimeter main gun, so pretty much the British 20-pounder, with 253 millimeters of penetration for the late war period. And all in all, it looks like an oversized Centurion. That's really all I could say about it. It just seems like a slightly upscaled Centurion with more armor. Doesn't really have more firepower, and on it, all honesty, it lacks firepower for what it is. Although it doesn't lack in penetration, so yeah, I guess I'll take an 84 millimeter gun with that much penetration. 253 is really good. Understand, I've seen 120 millimeter main guns that didn't have that much penetration. Now, when it comes to the turret traverse and the gun depression, it works really good. Gun accuracy is really spot on. Mobility, though, is, wow, this thing sucks. I mean, it really, really sucks. It's not so bad when driving a straight line. Still sucks, but it does go. But when it comes to any type of turning, to the left or to the right, this thing just really bites it. Yeah, every time I had to turn the vehicle, I kind of felt sorry for myself. And hopefully you feel sorry watching me trying to turn this thing in any direction that I'm taking it. Other than that, it does fine. It does fine in the realm of protection. It does fine in the realm of firepower. It just lacks mobility, which is, you know, when you look at the holy trinity of tanks, you're trying to get it as mostly even as you can, but there is times where you tend to lack in an area when it comes to the holy trinity of tanks, and yeah, this one just lacks in the mobility department. The next one I have here is the Muffle 1.5 cm from Vladislav, and this weighs in at 85.65 tons. It has a 150 millimeter main gun, which I guess the name kind of indicated that, with 210 millimeters of penetration. Now, the smaller turret on the roof actually is armed with a 75 millimeter main gun with 87 millimeters of penetration. Now, the mobility on this thing is, yeah, it's kind of like driving around a bunker. It's definitely nothing I'd brag about. Now, when it comes to the gun, though, it does work. I could see where it was inspired by the Lowe, the German Lion, especially when it comes to the turret and the gun and even certain sections of the hull. Oh no, that being said, this thing is an absolute behemoth. Gun depression is actually really, really good on this thing. I'll give it credit for that. Now, the secondary turret, the gun depression is not so good, but who cares when you got a 150 millimeter main gun, and really that 75 millimeter gun isn't really going to be effective against anything except for maybe tank destroyers and light tanks. Now, that being said, it would be a good fire support weapon for taking out infantry that are maybe in fortified locations, but yeah, that's probably really about it. Now, when it came to driving this thing up a hill, this thing was absolutely miserable. It struggled going up hills, and in certain cases, I just could not get up the hill. And the other problem is the suspension is so low, this thing is easy to get stuck. I actually didn't get stuck here, but trust me, I've gotten enough creators' vehicles stuck while recording to know what's going to get stuck. So, yeah, there you go. The Muffle. Not bad looking, but bad performing. Besides it bad performing, I'm going to get on to the MS-1 by Ultima. This weighs in at 5.4 tons, armed with a 37 millimeter main gun with 45 millimeters of penetration. For the interwar period, honestly, it's not all bad there. When you look at it, even the mobility is not bad, but you have to look at this vehicle and go, this is not an interwar vehicle. This is a World War I vehicle. And as a World War I vehicle, this thing performs really well. But as an interwar vehicle, when you consider the different types of interwar vehicles, this thing is definitely towards the bottom of the dog pile when it comes to performing. Now, understand that interwar, they were still kind of trying to figure out different designs for tanks and just trying to figure out what was going to work and what wasn't going to work. And that being said, the MS-1 is really a clone of the French FT-17. So, yeah, I mean, the FT-17 doesn't perform that well in this time frame either, even though it was still a fairly active tank. So, I'm not saying his design is crap. I'm actually saying his design is actually fairly accurate to an MS-1. That it just would not perform very well in this time frame, especially later time frames, like when you start getting early war. But the French were light years ahead when it came to designs in this time frame. Unfortunately for them, by the early war period, yeah, they were just suddenly went way behind the 8 ball. And then, of course, this thing is very Soviet and has no gun depression, and I got it stuck. The next vehicle I have for you is the FT-43A by Artsy Johnny. And this weighs in at 40.27 tons. It has a 90 millimeter main gun and 152 millimeters of penetration, and it is for the mid-war period. All in all, it's really not actually a bad vehicle, and I actually rather like the design for it, for being like, it feels like a very original design. And I've said that before about his previous design. There was another Community Steel where I talked about a design that actually had fairly similar characteristics. And what it looks like is he took the hull from that design that I saw up in the show previously. I wish I honestly can't remember the name of it. And it looks like he upgraded, like put on a redesigned turret, maybe did some slight changes to the hull, probably thickened up the armor, because the armor is actually quite effective on this. That being said, though, the mobility on this is really, really weird. So I noticed when I was driving this, anytime I'd go over like 22, 24 miles per hour, it would just suddenly lose a bunch of speed. Like it just, like the engine just cut out or something like that. But it just kept going. It was the weirdest thing. I also noticed when driving up certain types of terrain that it would lose a lot of speed as well, but then sometimes it wouldn't. It's just like this Thane's mobility is just really weird. That being said, when the mobility is working pretty accurately, or accurately to what I think he was going after, it's nothing to write home to mom about. It's just good enough. But the armor, at least, is really good. And, well, it's kind of on the lighter end of a heavy, or even on the heavier end of a medium. So it kind of fits in that area where, like, the Panther did. And honestly, when it came to the gun depression, accuracy, etc., it performed rather well on those ends. So all in all, in my opinion, it's not a bad vehicle. It just has a couple of flaws. Now the next vehicle I have for you here, and this is the final vehicle for today. This is the KV-222 from Rocket Panzer II. I dare you to say 2 that many times. But anyway, this weighs in at 90.05 tons, and it is armed with the 52 millimeter main gun, or 3 of them to be exact. Yes, folks, that's because we have not 1, not 2, but 3 KV-2s mounted on one KV-2 hull. Just, you know, when one KV-2 is too few, and one KV-2 isn't, or two KV-2s isn't enough, I give you 3 KV-2s. Stalin approves. This thing is just a meme. And actually, it really is a meme. I've seen the meme before of the KV-222, and it was just interesting that someone took the time to make that. And besides the fact, he also took the time to do the machine gun as well, the DT machine guns. So I'll give him credit there for that one. But yeah, I mean, what else do I need to say except for, yeah, give me 3 KV-2s on one tank. Why not? Seems like a good idea. Anyway, folks, I'm going to wrap up today's episode of Community Steel. Hopefully you enjoyed the projects that I showed here. And, yeah, have yourself a wonderful day.